Could you share more about your current book project on why and how armed groups kidnapped during Civil War? Maybe a bit about what you hope it adds to the dialogue and discussion on this topic.
Taking us back a decade to when I first decided that I wanted to study kidnapping, I knew that I wanted to talk to perpetrators. I wanted to really understand directly from people who have kidnapped how and why they do it and what that has meant for their organization. And so right around the time that I was starting my dissertation was 2016. And in 2016, the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, which had been the oldest and largest insurgent group in the Western Hemisphere, was signing a peace deal with the government of Colombia to end their decades of violence. And the FARC were some of the world's most notorious kidnappers. And for almost the luck of the timing, that it became a really viable time to speak to former kidnappers and not, knock on wood, be kidnapped myself. So I decided to go to Colombia and spend some time speaking to former perpetrators. And once I arrived in Colombia the first time for my research, I ended up speaking to not only former kidnappers from a whole range of different armed groups in Colombia, but I had the opportunity to meet former hostages and their family members, private hostage negotiators and security personnel, officers from the military and from the police who had been combating kidnapping in Colombia for decades. And so I conducted around 150 interviews with folks across the kidnapping spectrum and across the kidnapping life cycle to really understand how it works. So my book is based on those interviews and explaining what kidnapping looked like in the Colombian Civil War. And one of the primary things that I find and argue in the book is that the two biggest left-wing rebel groups in Colombia, the FARC and the ELN, the National Liberation Army, used kidnapping to enforce the taxes that they imposed on local populations. And I say taxes, we might put it in quotes, but armed groups, just like the state, impose an expectation of payment on local populations, and they treat it like a protection racket. They essentially say, if you pay me, you're safe, but if you don't, you are subject to violence that I might impose on you. And so the FARC and the ELN used kidnapping as a way to punish those who didn't pay the taxes that they felt that the population owed them. And kidnapping was, for them, what they saw as an effective and appropriate punishment because it recouped money lost, perceived as lost. They were able to make back those tax payments, but they were also able to use the kidnapping to threaten and advertise to the hostage's neighbor, if you don't pay up, this could happen to you. That's what the book's about.